All right. We made it. Kinda, sort of. That thing's a pain. We're having some technical issues. What else is new? That's what happens when your budget is beer and poor lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, buddy. You'll notice we're not in our normal environs. I don't think we've ever broadcast from this room before.
No, but Vincent had dental surgery today.
So we are hanging out with him, sequestered from the other ones, so that he doesn't get into tang tussles with them or anything like that. And he's being special. He's being Vincent. Aren't you, buddy? Like, the heck with that anesthesia. You're going to do what you want to do. Anesthesia? What anesthesia? What are you doing?
I don't think he knows what
he's stoned out of his mind.
He is.
Oh, and looks like you managed to take my script down, buddy. Good job. I don't know how you managed to do that. Anyways, hope that everybody's doing well. Thank you for your patience because, we're a bit late. We normally would have been on a week or two ago.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Okay. I'll just deal with this then.
Life happened. So, everything's fine.
It's just, we got busy. So.
Everything's fine, except for you and your fussing with your technology.
Yes, well, this is what happens when there are massive updates and all of a sudden it kicks you out of everything.
But, hope that you all are having, doing well. Hope you've had a lovely April. Our April has been bonkers, but in a good way, I would say.
Yes.
Been keeping busy, and we've had this on the back burner for a little while now.
Yeah. I'm in Kansas.
Kansas, yeah, we're checking off another state tonight. You've driven through Kansas.
Oh, I've driven through Kansas several times.
Yep, I have never been to Kansas, but...
It's a lot of wheat fields and pig farms.
Corn?
Corn, sometimes. Well, a lot of wheat fields.
Yep. But there's a lot more to Kansas than just the agricultural stuff. Because there's something about Kansas that...
Yeah, well, there's Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz.
Oh, there is that.
Because that's what our skeletons are right now. That just got put up yesterday. For the rest of it, I finally got Toto out today. So, it is done. Wizard of Oz is out.
Next set of skeleton decor.
Yes.
But, yeah, there's other things about Kansas that people don't quite expect.
Mm-hmm.
There's the wide open skies, there's the open roads, there's quiet towns that seem to stretch on without interruption. Kind of feels like a place where things pass through and just keep moving. But if you spend enough time there, if you stop in the right places, walk through the right buildings, listen just a little longer than you normally would, you will start to notice something else. Because in a state built on movement, on trails and railways and people heading somewhere new, not quite everything is left.
So probably one of the most famous haunted houses in Kansas.
In all of the United States, honestly.
Is the Sallie House. This is in Atchison, Kansas. It's a quiet town. It's a modest house that doesn't look particularly unusual. It sits like many others, aged, a little worn, shaped by time, but over a century of stories have gathered here. Depending on whom you ask, something may still be waiting inside. The house was built in the early 1870s. Hello, Mr. Vincent. Please don't. He's going for the can. Sorry, I left his can of food on the table that's housing the camera for tonight. And Mr. Vincent senses it and would very much like to eat it.
Keep reading.
Okay, I'm watching him so he doesn't focus.
It's fine. Keep reading.
Anyway, the house was built in the early 1870s by a man named Michael Finney. Not long after its completion, Finney does die within its walls, and the home passes to his son, Dr. Charles Finney, one of the only physicians in the area at this time. Now, in those days, medical care looked very different. There were no nearby hospitals, no emergency rooms, and for many in Atchison, help came to their door, or to his in this case. Don't swat at me. Around 1910, on a night that would later become central to the house's legend, a desperate mother arrives at Dr. Finney's doorstep. In her arms was her 6-year-old daughter, a gravely ill child, barely holding on, and her name was Sallie. Dr. Finney examined the child and quickly determined the cause, appendicitis. It was severe. There was no time to wait. Surgery began almost immediately, right then and there, in the front room of the house. Careful, he's right here.
Yep.
But in the urgency of the moment, something went wrong. The anesthesia hadn't taken effect before the procedure began, and as the doctor worked, the little girl's screams filled the room. Then they stopped. Sallie didn't survive, and according to local legend, she never truly left the house. For decades, the house passed quietly between owners, nothing widely reported, nothing that couldn't be dismissed as quirks of an aging structure. But that would change in the early 1990s. In 1992, Tony and Deborah Pickman moved into the home, expecting their first child. To them, it seemed like the perfect place to begin a new chapter, a historic house with character, space, and charm. After everything was normal at first, then came small things. Lights would flicker, appliances behaving strangely, a phone line that would go dead without explanation. And the kinds of things that people, brush off, especially in an older home. But then one detail stood out. Their dog. It began reacting to the nursery, not playfully, not curiously, defensively. It would growl, bark, refuse to enter the room, as if some unseen thing already had claimed the space. Still, it was easy to dismiss until their son was born. After Taylor arrived, the atmosphere in the house seemed to shift. One day, the couple returned home to find the nursery disturbed. Stuffed animals normally kept neatly on a chair had been moved, placed deliberately on the floor, and it was subtle, but unsettling, enough to make them question whether someone had entered the house. They reset everything, put the toys back, settled their son into his crib. Then, as they stepped away, the nursery light stayed on by itself. When they rushed back upstairs, one of the stuffed animals was on the floor again. They tried to explain it away. Old wiring, memory playing tricks, anything but what it felt like. The pattern continued. Each time they corrected the room, something would change again. Objects moved, lights shifted. The nursery refused to stay as they left it. Then one night it escalated. After checking the nursery and heading downstairs, they found one of the toys had somehow moved out of the room entirely, relocated to a different part of the house, and positioned in a way that felt intentional. That was enough. They left for the night, and when they returned, they didn't come alone. A relative reached out to a psychic who described the presence in the house. A young girl. She gave it a name. Sallie. According to the psychic, the spirit wasn't malicious, just a child, someone who wanted attention, who wanted to feel like a part of a family again. It was an explanation, and for a time it was enough to bring a sense of comfort. But not everything in the house seemed to fit that description. One day, Tony's brother visited, skeptical, curious, unconvinced by the stories. As Tony demonstrated some of the strange activity, he jokingly addressed the empty room. "Sallie, if you're here, say cheese." And at that exact moment, as a photo was being taken, something moved. A toy, one they had been watching, shifted on its own. This time, there was no question. Almost immediately after, the atmosphere changed again. The brother later described a sudden, overwhelming sensation as if his body no longer belonged to him. He couldn't move. He couldn't react. It just stood there, frozen, and feeling passed as quickly as it had arrived. Moments, like it had been, began to stack. For Tony, they became something more personal. He began to experience things that Deborah didn't. Unexplained sensations, sudden pain, marks that would appear without cause, always when he was alone, always when no one else could witness them. At first, it was confusing. Then it became exhausting. Sleep grew difficult. The house no longer felt like a place to rest. Over time, the strain began to show, not just physically, but mentally. There were moments Tony couldn't fully account for, periods of time that seemed to slip, emotions that didn't feel entirely his own. The line between stress and something else began to blur. Still, they stayed. Investigators came. Cameras were set up. Some activity was captured, enough to raise more questions than answers, enough to make leaving feel complicated. Then came an attempt to intervene, a cleansing. The goal was simple, remove whatever was in the house. But the attempt didn't go as planned. The activity didn't stop. It intensified. The house, which once felt merely unsettled, now felt reactive, as if something inside had been disturbed, and it didn't appreciate the intrusion. For Tony, it escalated again. More physical, more direct, and eventually something happened that neither of them could ignore. One night, as he stood near the top of the stairs, an unseen force struck him, hard enough to break part of the railing, hard enough to send him stumbling. It was sudden, violent, and completely unexplainable, and that is what changed everything. Whatever doubts remained were gone. Within weeks, they left the house for good. Today, Sallie House still stands in Atchison. Visitors can walk through it, spend time inside, even stay overnight if they choose, and many do. Some report small things, footsteps, cold spots, objects slightly out of place. Others describe something more personal, a presence, a child, or something that doesn't feel like one. There are stories of unexplained marks, equipment failing without reason, animals refusing to enter certain rooms, especially the nursery. It's always the nursery. And while no one can say for certain what happened in that house or what remains there now, the stories continue, quietly pass from one visitor to the next, because in a place like that, it's not always what you see that stays with you. Sometimes it's what follows you out.
So, speaking of technical difficulties, I apologize in that the comment feed is not completely cooperating with me here, so sorry if I was a little delayed on that. Patrick and Beverly were commenting on here, and I didn't see any of it until I refreshed the page. So
it's not just me.
No, not just you.
But thank you for fixing that.
Yeah, you're all taken care of now.
Okay.
But Patrick, Beverly, glad to see you here tonight. Thank you for chiming in. And Beverly was commenting that the kitty cats basically get what they want.
He wants out, but he doesn't get that.
Yeah, not quite.
We have to let the others finish the crunchies because he's not allowed crunchies for 2 weeks, and this is going to be a bone of contention.
Yeah. They want what they want when they want it, and it's a thing. But, yeah. And Patrick's ridden his bike across Kansas.
Cool.
So he assures us that Kansas is not nearly as pancake flat as they make it out to be. That there are some rolling hills there. Yep. Excuse me. Sorry. But yeah, kitties want what they want when they want it. Mm-hmm. And also they approve of your Wizard of Oz decor.
Yes.
The flying monkey just went up yesterday too.
Yes, the flying monkey is not lit up, so he kind of hides a little bit, which is appropriate.
Hiding up in the tree. But yeah, so we'll go ahead, we'll move along, and we're not leaving Atchison yet. So from one house to another, the stories in Atchison don't seem to stay contained, because while some hauntings feel tied to a single moment, others take shape over generations. Just a few streets away, there's another home, larger, older, and perhaps even harder to explain. Along the Missouri River, there stands a house that seems almost designed to invite stories. The McInteer Villa rises from the hillside in red brick and ornate detail. Turrets reaching upward, windows watching the street below. It looks the way people imagine a haunted house should look. Not abandoned, not ruined, but preserved, as if it's still waiting for something or someone. The home was built between 1889 and 1890 by John McInteer, an Irish immigrant who had arrived in the United States alone as a young boy. Over time, he built a successful life for himself, eventually becoming a wealthy harness maker. The villa was meant to reflect that success, a symbol of what he had achieved after chasing the promise of something better. But like many houses with long histories, what followed would slowly reshape that legacy. Tragedy came early. McInteer's first wife, Alice Conley, died in the home after a long illness in December of 1891. It was one of the first confirmed deaths within the house, and for some, the beginning of something that never quite settled. Visitors even now sometimes describe a faint, powdery scent lingering in the air, something like perfume, subtle, easy to miss, but persistent. After Alice's passing, John remarried. His second wife, Anna Donovan, moved into the home with her children from a previous marriage. Together, they continued to live in the villa after John's death in 1902, carrying on within the same walls that had already begun to collect memory and loss. Anna remained in the house until her own death in 1916. For years, the home stayed within the extended family. Life continued. Rooms were filled. Conversations carried through the halls. But not every story within those walls would end quietly. One of the most enduring figures tied to the villa is Anna's son, Charles Donovan. He was a veteran of the First World War. Like many who returned from that conflict, he came back changed. Accounts suggest that his health never fully recovered, physically or otherwise. Illness followed him home, and whatever he carried with him from the war never quite left. In October of 1922, at the age of 34, Charles died in an upstairs bedroom. His death marked a turning point in the house's history. Visitors today often report hearing footsteps on the second floor, heavy, deliberate pacing that moves along the hallway, back and forth, as if someone is still walking the same path they once knew. Doors open without explanation, doorknobs turn on their own, and sometimes voices, low and distinct, seem to drift through the house when no one else is there. Some believe those moments belong to Charles. After the family's time in the villa came to an end, the house entered a different chapter. By the late 1920s, it had become a boarding house. Over the next several decades, people came and went, temporary residents, short stays, lives that passed through rather than settled. And with each new occupant, the history of the house became more difficult to trace. Records blurred, stories overlapped, but certain details remained. In 1929, a young family named the Woods lived in the house. That same year, their 4-year-old daughter, Romana, died under unclear circumstances. The family left Atchison not long after. And yet, visitors have since described hearing something unusual within the house. Soft sounds that resemble a child crying. Not constant or overwhelming, just present enough to be noticed. A sound that doesn't seem to belong. As the years passed, the villa's reputation began to take shape, not from a single event, but from accumulation. Footsteps, voices, the feeling of being watched. And then one figure in particular began to stand out. Her name, as it's most often remembered, is Goldie. In life, she was known as Isabel Addis, a woman who purchased the home in the early 1950s. She had a background in music, at one point teaching violin, though accounts of her life vary depending on who is telling the story. Some describe her as refined and artistic. Others remember her as eccentric. She lived alone, wore black, and spent her time surrounded by the fading grandeur of a house that was expensive to maintain. She had plans to restore the villa, but never quite managed to bring them to life. Over time, the house and its owner became closely linked in the minds of those around them. And when she died in 1969, that connection didn't seem to fade. According to those familiar with the home, Isabel, or Goldie, spent much of her time in a rocking chair near the fireplace. It was there, according to most accounts, that she died quietly. Today, the chair remains, and it has become one of the most talked about objects in the house. Visitors have reported seeing it move, slowly rocking back and forth, even when the room is still. Some claim to have seen a figure nearby, dressed in dark clothing, moving through the space without sound. Whether it's memory, suggestion, or something else, the chair has become a focal point, a place where the past feels closer than it should. By the time the house passed into new ownership in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the stories had grown more varied. Some were grounded in known history, others were less certain. There are rumors, quietly shared, about the basement, stories suggesting that the space may have once been used for purposes not entirely documented. Nothing confirmed, nothing that can be proven, but enough to add another layer to the house's reputation. The basement itself is divided into several brick-walled rooms. Even without the stories, the space carries a different atmosphere. heavier and more enclosed. Visitors often describe it as uncomfortable, though few can explain exactly why. And above it all, the rest of the house continues to shift between the familiar and the unexplained. In the attic, footsteps are sometimes heard overhead when no one is present. Shadows move where there should be none. Some visitors, particularly women, have reported the sensation of being touched or lightly scratched by something unseen. Others describe a darker presence there, less defined, harder to place, not tied to any single figure, just present. Outside, even those who never stepped inside the villa have reported unusual experiences. The tower, one of the home's most distinctive features, has drawn particular attention over the years. People passing by have described seeing lights flicker within it, appearing and disappearing without clear cause. At times, when according to older accounts, no electricity was even present in that part of the house. Whether those moments can be explained today is unclear, but the stories remain. And in recent years, the McInteer Villa has entered yet another phase. Rather than distancing itself from its reputation, the house has leaned into it. Visitors are now invited inside, to walk the halls, to spend the night, to experience the space for themselves. Paranormal investigators bring equipment. Cameras are placed in rooms where activity is most often reported. Objects are arranged, observed, and left to see if anything changes. And sometimes it does. Doors open, items shift. Temperature changes occur without warning. Sudden drops or rises that seem to pass through a room like a wave. There are accounts of objects being moved with enough force to be noticed, of voices captured on recordings when no one else remembers speaking, of figures glimpsed in windows, only to vanish when someone looks again. For many, these experiences are enough. For others, they invite closer examination. During one visit, a small group was guided through the house as part of an investigation. What began as a standard tour slowly shifted into something more personal. At one point, a door upstairs, one that had been closed earlier, was found open. Initially, it was easy to explain. Old houses shift, air moves, doors don't always stay where they're left. But when footage from a camera was reviewed, something stood out. The door had drifted open. The handle had turned on its own. Later, as the group moved through another room, equipment designed to detect changes in energy began to respond. Words were generated, simple, fragmented. At first, they seemed random, until they weren't. Certain responses began to align with details specific to individuals in the group. Names, objects, small pieces of personal information that hadn't been spoken aloud. Enough to make coincidence feel less certain. One participant in particular found the experience difficult to dismiss. The responses seemed directed, connected to events and relationships that weren't visible to anyone else in the room. The moment passed, the room returned to normal, but the impression remained. By the time the group reached the basement, the energy, whether real or perceived, had shifted again. The space felt tighter, more focused, the kind of place where silence carries weight. Nothing dramatic happened, and yet it was the part of the house many were most eager to leave. Experiences like these don't offer clear answers. They don't prove anything definitively, but they add to the pattern, to the growing collection of moments that people carry with them after they leave. Because that's the thing about McInteer Villa. It doesn't rely on a single story. It doesn't center around one figure, one tragedy, or one explanation. Instead, it feels layered, built over time, each generation leaving something behind, intentionally or otherwise. A scent in the hallway, a step on the stairs, a voice where it shouldn't be, a presence that seems to shift depending on where you stand and how long you stay. And maybe that's why the question surrounding the house has never been easy to answer. Is it haunted by the people who lived and died within its walls? Or is it shaped by the stories that have been told about it for more than a century? Or is it something else entirely? Something less defined, something that doesn't belong to any one person at all. Because in a place like that, it's possible that what lingers isn't just memory, it's accumulation. And once something like that takes hold, it doesn't always let go.
The idea of layering stone theory where things are just laid into the surroundings, the wood, the stone, the earth, is an ongoing theory among many of the paranormal groups out there. And it's not just homes that feel like this where generations have lived. We've talked about this also in military forts as well, and that's where we're actually going to go next. We're going to go to Fort Leavenworth, where the history and apparently the experiences have stretched across nearly 2 centuries. Now, Fort Leavenworth in itself doesn't present itself as a haunted place. It presents itself as a historical place. It's established in 1827. It's one of the oldest active military installations at the west of the Mississippi River. To this day, it remains operational. The roads are maintained, the buildings are in use, and its purpose is clearly defined. Visitors don't wander in casually. Entry requires identification, a visitor's pass, and a reason to be there. It's an active military location. But once you're inside, something becomes very apparent. This isn't just a military base. It's a place where time has layered itself generation after generation without fully ever clearing what came before. Across the grounds, there are buildings that date back to more than a century. Some have been restored, others stand with quiet wear of long use. Among them is what is known as the Rookery. It's often cited as the oldest home in the state of Kansas. Nearby is the old disciplinary barracks. They still loom with a presence that feels heavier than the architecture can actually explain. And stories follow these places. They're not loud, they're not dramatic, they're persistent. Military personnel and residents over the years have reported moments that are difficult to place. Footsteps in empty corridors, figures glimpsed where there shouldn't be anybody, a subtle sense of being watched in spaces that should feel routine. None of it is formally documented. None of it is as easily dismissed either. The Frontier Army Museum located within the fort offers a more structured look at its past. There you are going to find artifacts, uniforms, weapons that tell the story of the westward expansion and the evolving role of the United States Army. It is measured, it's educational, it's precise. But even here, the ghost stories find their way in. Each October, the museum hosts a guided walking tour of the fort, one that leans into the quieter side of its history. Not exaggerated, not theatrical, just a recognition that places like this, with so much time behind them, tend to collect more than records. They collect impressions, and those impressions seem to gather more strongly in one particular part of the fort, the cemetery. Fort Leavenworth is home to 2 of them. At first glance, they appear similar, rows of headstones, open ground, familiar stillness that accompanies places meant for remembrance. But standing in each one tells a different story. The Fort Leavenworth National Cemetery is what most would expect. The grounds are carefully maintained, the grass is trimmed, pathways are cleared. It carries an atmosphere of dignity, one shaped by intention. Visitors move throughout it quietly. Groundskeepers tend to the space with visible care. Families come and go, leaving behind flowers, flags, small markers of connection. It feels attended, not just physically, but also emotionally. A place where memory is preserved with purpose. The U.S. Disciplinary Barracks Cemetery, not far away, is something else entirely. It is set apart physically and in many ways emotionally. The grass is not neglected, but it lacks the same level of attention. The space is quieter, less visited. There are no regular signs of maintenance, no steady flow of people moving through. It's not abandoned feeling, but it feels distant. The cemetery was designated for military prisoners, men who died while serving sentences at the fort. Their stories are a part of the same broader history, but their place within is different. And that difference is difficult to ignore. Toward the back of the cemetery, along a fence line, there's a smaller group of graves set apart from the rest. 14 markers. They belong to German prisoners of war executed in 1945. Accused of killing fellow prisoners they believe to be collaborating with the American forces, and they were hanged in the final days surrounding the end of World War II, after the conflict had effectively concluded in Europe. The timing was deliberate. The executions were carried out after the war's end to avoid retaliation. It's a detail that often goes unnoticed, but standing there, it changes the weight of the space. There's no dramatic story attached to the site, no specific reports of hauntings tied to those graves. But the separation, the quiet, the sense of something unresolved in the way the land is arranged, it invites reflection. Because not all history settles in the same way, some of it is honored, some of it is remembered quietly, some of it is just set aside. Elsewhere in Kansas, that same idea appears in different forms. In small towns known as Wilson, known for its Czech heritage and historic limestone buildings, time has left its own marks. There are plans to rebuild the Czech Opera House, a structure lost to fire in 2009, as an open-air theater. The intention is clear. Preserve what can still be carried forward to rebuild rather than erase. It's a different kind of response to history, but it echoes the same question. What do we choose to remember, and how do we do it? Back at Fort Leavenworth, the question doesn't always have a single answer. It exists in contrast between spaces, in the difference between one cemetery and another, in the buildings that remain in use, and the stories that just linger outside the official record. There's no grand conclusion here, not definitive explanations, just a place of history that has been layered and carefully, deliberately, sometimes unevenly. For those who spend enough time there, walking the same paths, moving between the same spaces, it can feel like the past isn't entirely behind them. Not in a way that demands attention, but in a way that quietly remains. Because in places like this, history doesn't just live in memory, it lives in how it's kept and how it isn't.
Places like Fort Leavenworth carry history in a very visible way, preserved, documented, carefully maintained. But sometimes the quieter stories settle into places that have been repurposed, places that look new on the surface but haven't entirely let go of what they once were. Get to that in just a second. Just a couple of comments. So Beverly did comment, wouldn't be surprised if most of the military bases are haunted.
We've covered quite a few of them.
We have 2 complete episodes dedicated to military base hauntings.
And I still have more.
Yeah, but
I found my way onto an online forum of military personnel and their stories. Yeah, it's there's a lot.
yes. Yeah. So I dropped links to those on our YouTube page because
that's where they're located these days.
Facebook in their infinite wisdom purged them a long time ago.
Yes.
But we have them saved. They're on our YouTube page, so you can check that out. And if you're watching this on YouTube later on, well, you know where to look. Just check our channel. But yeah, so there was that.
Yep.
But moving on to...
Well, because, you need a place to stay when you're going to go look at these places.
We love our haunted hotels. So if you're looking for one in Kansas, there's one that doesn't disappoint. In the city of Leavenworth, there's a place where past and present sit comfortably side by side. Today it's known as the Leavenworth Local, a boutique hotel with thoughtfully designed rooms, polished spaces, and the kind of atmosphere that invites guests to settle in and stay a while. But long before it welcomed travelers, the building served a very different purpose. It was once Immaculata High School. Built in the early 1920s, the school stood as a cornerstone of Catholic education in the community. For generations, students passed through its halls, attending classes, gathering in the auditorium, moving between classrooms that echoed with routine and structure. The Sisters of Charity helped guide its mission, shaping not just the curriculum, but the rhythm of daily life inside the building. Over time, enrollment declined. The challenges were gradual at first, then harder to ignore, and eventually, after decades of service, the school closed its doors. But the building remained. Today, much of its original character still lingers. The former office has become the lobby. The gymnasium still stands, repurposed but recognizable. Even a blackboard remains, inviting guests to leave their mark, just as students once did. It's a place that doesn't feel erased. See what I did there? Just repurposed. And maybe that's part of what makes the stories easier to believe. Because while there are no officially documented hauntings tied to the building, there are accounts, quiet ones, usually shared by those who spend the most time there. Staff members, people who know the building, not just as a place to stay, but as a place to maintain. There are reports of a little girl, seen briefly, often out of the corner of the eye. Not threatening, not even particularly startling, just present. A figure that appears for a moment, then disappears before there's time to fully understand what was seen. And then there is the sense of someone else. A presence often associated with a former nun, not seen as clearly, but certainly felt. Heard sometimes, in subtle ways. Footsteps where there shouldn't be any. Movement in spaces that are otherwise empty. One area in particular seems to carry more of that energy than others. The chapel suite on the second floor. When unoccupied, staff have reported hearing footsteps inside. Not loud or frantic, just steady and measured. The kind of movement that suggests someone walking with purpose, even when no one is there. The room itself remains quiet to guests, but when it's empty, it doesn't always feel that way. And that seems to be the pattern here. Nothing overwhelming, nothing that demands belief, just small moments, fleeting impressions, the sense that something of the building's past hasn't entirely let go. Because places like this, places that held years of routine, of structure, of life, don't always transition cleanly. Sometimes they carry forward pieces of what they once were, a memory in motion, a presence in passing. And for those who spend enough time inside, it can begin to feel like the building isn't just preserving its history, it's still quietly living in it.
Now, while there are presences, words are difficult this late at night, sorry, that will announce themselves. Some are more subtle, fleeting, easy to miss, but then there are those who just want to be a little more active. They're a little more restless, and they're going to let you know they're there. So we're going to move over to Wilson, Kansas, to the Midland Railroad Hotel. Now, Wilson is a small town. It's where the pace is slower, the past feels closer. There's a hotel that will hold on to both of these, and that is the Midland Railroad Hotel. It stands as a reminder to another era. Originally built in 1899, it was once part of a network of stops that supported the steady rhythm of rail traffic across the Midwest. Travelers passed through on their way between Kansas City and Denver, and for a time, Midland was considered one of the finest hotels along that route. It was a place of movement, of arrivals and departures, of people staying just long enough before they continued on. But not everything in the Midland's history followed that pattern. In 1902, fire tore through the building, destroying much of the original structure. It was rebuilt, restored, and eventually returned to operation. Over the years, ownership changed, the town grew around it, and it became quieter as the golden age of rail travel faded into memory. Still, the hotel remained. Today, after extensive restoration, it once again welcomes guests. The rooms are updated, its atmosphere carefully preserved, and its connection to the past very much still intact. But some believe not everything left with time. I'm sorry if you hear that. The cats are voicing their opinions about being separated. Do we have a comment?
Oh, no, we're good.
Okay. There are stories that are tied to the Midland. Quiet ones, usually shared by the staff or the guests after a stay. Reports of small, unexplained moments that seem to center around one particular presence, a child. The most commonly described figure is that of a little girl seen in passing, or heard more often than she's seen. Guests have described the sound of light footsteps moving quickly down the third-floor hallway, as if someone were running just out of sight. Not heavy, not threatening, just quick, playful. There are also accounts of beds shifting unexpectedly, covers disturbed, mattresses suddenly dipping, and if someone had climbed up and began to bounce. On occasion, guests have entered a room to find it momentarily unsettled, only for everything to return to stillness when they looked again. Staff members have had their own experiences, objects behaving oddly, equipment turning on and off without explanation, the faint scent of smoke appearing without a source, just long enough to be noticed, and then it's gone. Some attribute that detail to the fire, not as something dramatic, just as a residual reminder, a moment that may have left an impression behind. While there are those who believe that the hotel may hold more than one presence, echoes of people who were there when the fire broke out, it is the little girl who remains the most consistent thread, the one most often described, the one most easily remembered. There's no confirmed identity, no record that clearly explains who she might have been or why she would still be there. It's only the pattern, the footsteps, the movement, the sense that in a place once defied by people coming and going, some may have decided to stay. Because the Midland Railroad Hotel was never meant to be permanent, it was a place in between, a stop along the way, and a century later, it continues to offer something beyond rest, a connection to the past, and that quiet suggestion that not every guest checked out. How goes it?
Good. So Patrick did chime in and noted, hotels, they're pretty fascinating. Such a liminal space. Mm-hmm. Space we're passing through and a place that probably catches many emotions, memories, and energy. It's no wonder why so many are haunted.
Yes.
Lots of haunted hotels.
I mean, we start our tour in front of 2 of them.
Yes.
And we talk about 3 total.
Yep.
Almost 4.
Almost 4, if they ever get around to finishing the renovation.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's just here within a couple of miles of one another in downtown Richmond.
And I mean, we have our own experience with the smoke that's just residual. I mean, I've smelled that up where the Richmond Theater burned.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. It's a thing.
It's a thing.
Yep.
It's there.
All right. Did you read that?
I did know.
You did not. Okay. Kind of on the same note.
Yeah. I mean, Patrick, you just did our transition beautifully.
Yeah. Hotels were never meant to hold on to people. They were built for movement, for brief stays and quick departures. But every now and then, someone checks in and never quite leaves. Which brings us to another hotel. In the town of Ellenwood, Kansas, the historic Wolf Hotel stands as a reminder of a different kind of travel. Built in 1894 along the Santa Fe Trail, it once served as a top-end stop for salesmen and passengers moving through the region by rail. At its height, the hotel offered 30 rooms, welcoming a steady flow of guests passing through on their way somewhere else. Like many places from that era, it was built for movement, for brief stays, for lives that continued on beyond its walls. But one story tied to the Wolf Hotel never quite followed that pattern. In 1927, a man named Bernard Millet checked into the hotel and made it his way to the dining room on the first floor, what is now known as the Sunflower Dining Room. There, while lingering over his meal, something shifted. Details surrounding his final moments remain unclear. Some people believe it was tied to a broken engagement. Others suggest reasons that were never fully recorded. What is known is how it ended. Millet died there at his table. And according to those familiar with the space, a small piece of that moment remains, quite literally, embedded in the room. The bullet he fired is said to still be lodged in the ceiling above where he sat, a quiet marker of something that was never meant to last beyond a single evening. But the story didn't end there. Over time, staff and visitors began to treat that table differently. Not just as another place to sit, but as something reserved. Not officially, not by policy, but by habit. Because the presence associated with Bernard Millet has never been described as aggressive or destructive. If anything, it's quite the opposite. Quiet, contained, a figure tied to a single moment, a single place, that never quite moved beyond it. There are other stories within the hotel, accounts written guest books, mentions of unexplained sounds, the occasional sense that someone else is nearby when no one should be. and beneath the building, the underground tunnels, once used during the town's earlier days, add another layer to the experience. Today, they house a speakeasy, offering a different kind of gathering space, one that sits just below the surface of the past. But it's the dining room that seems to hold the strongest impression. A single table, a single moment, and a presence that has never needed to make itself known in dramatic ways. Because sometimes, in places like this, the quietest stories are the ones that remain the longest, and some reservations are never canceled.
Now, some stories will stay quiet, contained to that single room, that single moment. And there are places where the past just doesn't linger, it actually moves. Where one story turns into many, and where not every presence feels the same. So we're going to move over to Wichita, Kansas, and along the banks of the Arkansas River.
Patrick loved the name of the hotel. It is a great name for a hotel.
It is. Excuse me. This one is known as Century of Movement. The Broadview Hotel, now known as the Drury Plaza Hotel Broadview, rises 8 stories above the water, its brick exterior still reflecting the ambition of the early 1920s, when it first opened in 1922. It was more than just a place to stay, it was a destination. Travelers arrived by rail, by road, by carriage. The Chisholm Trails passed nearby, and the hotel quickly became one of the premier stops in the region. Inside, there was music, dining, and dancing, an atmosphere that reflected the energy of the growing city. During Prohibition, a speakeasy operated quietly within its walls. Later, an addition to the Crystal Ballroom brought another layer of elegance with its mosaic floor and sweeping space designed for gatherings that stretched late into the night. For decades, the Broadview was a place of motion, of people arriving, celebrating, and moving on. But not every story inside the hotel followed that pattern. One of the most enduring figures tied to the Broadview is the man simply known as Clarence. His story is often placed in 1929 during the height of the hotel's popularity. He arrived, as many guests did, well-dressed, composed, traveling with his wife. The hotel was alive with activity around them, the sounds of music and conversation carrying through the halls. But something happened during their stay. The accounts differ in detail, but the outcome remains the same. Clarence discovered his wife in the company of another man, and what followed was a moment of sudden violence, one that ended with her death inside the hotel. Not long after, Clarence returned to his room, and from there he went over the balcony. It is a story rooted in anger, betrayal, and a moment that unfolded too quickly to be undone. Yet, the presence associated with Clarence does not always match the weight of that history. Over the years, guests and staff have reported experiences that seem to center around him, but not in the way that one might expect. Phones ringing repeatedly in empty rooms, objects shifting just enough to be noticed, small disruptions that feel less threatening than intentional. There are accounts of curtains behaving strangely, of spaces appearing unsettled for only a moment before returning to normal. In one instance, a guest entered her room to find the curtains lifted and pressed upwards, as though gravity itself had briefly lost its hold on them. She chose not to stay the night. Elsewhere in the hotel, atmosphere shifts. In the Crystal Ballroom, some have claimed to see figures moving across the floor, dressed not in modern clothing, but entire more fitting to the early decades of the building's life. Shapes that resemble dancers moving along just at the edge of their perception before fading back into stillness. Along certain hallways, there are reports of sounds that don't belong, something like wings moving through empty space, though nothing visible accompanies the sound. In quieter moments, the staff had described small, isolated incidents. A sound where there should be none, a device activating without explanation, a presence that doesn't announce itself, but doesn't entirely leave either. In group settings, the stories persist. During guided tours, visitors have occasionally reported physical sensations, brief unexpected contact that can't be easily explained. A touch on the arm, a brush against the leg. Always fleeting, always just enough to be noticed, and then it's gone. The Broadview has changed over many years. The renovations have updated its interior, modernized its rooms, and preserved key elements of the design. The ballroom remains. The lobby still carries traces of the original character. Outside, the river continues to move past, as it always has. It is, by all appearances, a hotel that adapted to the time. But like many places with a long history of arrivals and departures, not everything seems to follow the same path. Because the stories tied to the Broadview don't point to a single presence. They don't follow a single pattern. Some feel playful. Others are harder to define. At the center of all is a figure whose story began in a moment of intensity, but whose presence, if it remains, has taken on a different shape over time. Not one of the constant disturbance, but one that lingers in very small ways. Subtle interruptions, quiet reminders. Because in a place built around movement, around people passing through without staying, there's always the possibility that someone decided not to leave.
So, Patrick was just noting that kind of wish that people learn to stop, breathe, count to 10 before reacting, or in this case, go for a 2-mile walk before you commit the actions of anger that, resulted.
Taking a life.
Yeah. There's a lot of moments that could benefit from that. Certainly this example is a prime one, but yeah, there's a lot of moments that could benefit from.
Go out, take a breath.
Yeah. But, alas, it's bringing us to the closing of our episode.
Yes.
So across Kansas, the pattern starts to take shape. A house where a moment never fully ended, a villa layered with the weight of generations, a fort where history was preserved, but not evenly, hotels built for travelers, where not every guest moved on. Individually, they feel like separate stories, but together they suggest something else. Because this is a place that was built on movement. Trails that carried people west, railroads that connect cities, rooms meant for a night, maybe 2, before continuing on. And yet, again and again, there are places where something remains. Not always seen, not always understood, but felt just enough to be noticed. Maybe it's memory, maybe it's the stories we tell, or maybe in certain places, something lingers a little longer than it should. Because in Kansas, for all the movement that defines it, there are still places where nothing ever really leaves.
Dun, dun, dun.
I never thought I'd want to go check out Kansas, but hey, now, sounds pretty cool.
I mean, there's things that we need to go do a road trip with.
I know, and there's spooky places to
And
stay
I
too.
want to go see the Wizard of Oz Museum, so,
There you go. Spooky places to stay, places to see. Maybe Kansas winds up on a road trip one day.
From here to there.
Yeah. But that does, again, draw us to the conclusion of our episode. It's going to be a little while before we come back.
Yeah.
Because just schedules are weird. Probably going to be on
June 1st, we're looking at...
Oh, we're completely skipping May?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, May 4th is what we're looking at.
Oh, just 1 week from now.
Is what we had on the schedule.
Okay, well, I think we can make that work.
I gotta look at the script
We'll make it work.
and see if I have something that'll work.
We'll make it work. We'll tentatively plan to be here
It's
next
another
week.
state, I don't remember which one.
Yeah. We'll tentatively plan to be here next week. We'll see what the script is or is not. Hopefully we'll be here because I hate the idea of skipping a month entirely.
Yeah, well, May 4th was the only day we had available.
I know. Next month is another.
It's very packed with stuff, with travel
Yeah.
and other things
But we will aim to be back
next week.
next week. I think we can manage it,
It might be shorter than usual.
but that's okay. Yeah. That's all right. We'll still churn out a quality product in some way, somehow.
Yeah.
And Mr. Vincent, are we getting cuddly now?
We're getting a little cuddly. I think he really wants to just go out and see his brother who's been crying on the other side of the door.
Well, we can do that again for a little bit.
And then you have to come back and be in bed in here tonight.
Yep. Which I know you're not going to like. But anyways, thank you all for watching. Hope that you all enjoyed. And yeah, yeah, I'm trying to think. That's pretty much it. As far as like the haunts front, just tours. We just
doing tours.
Just got tours through the next month. This month was crazy busy.
Ren Fair.
I guess the main other event was Ren Fair, which was a blast, by the way.
It was so much fun.
If you missed it this year, I can just about guarantee they will be doing it again. They're already talking about it, exactly when and all of that.
That's up in the air still.
Still to be determined. But follow the Richmond Ren Fair and or Virago Alley on social media for updates on what they got going on. But yeah, for the first time ever hosting it, they knocked it out of the park.
It was perfect.
Yeah, except for the weather. Particularly considering the weather, they really knocked it out of the park, with Saturday being blisteringly hot and then Sunday starting off cold.
Wet and windy.
Still, everybody that came out had a good time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyways, with that said, we will bid you adieu for now. If you ever have any questions or whatnot, as I always say, feel free to reach out. Love to hear from y'all. Until next time, y'all have a good night and stay spooky, y'all.
Bye.